Well, Queens, I have Jillian Murphy back with me today, and you may already know her because I recommend her all the time. But those of you that don't, I'm just going to read her short bio out to you now and then introduce her again. So, Dr. Jillian Murphy is a naturopathic doctor who focuses on helping women ditch diverse as fuck, all or nothing approaches to health so that they can find their vibrant, feel good lifestyle and body. So, Jillian, thanks for coming back on today.
I'm pretty thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I wanted you to, okay, let me rephrase that. I invited you to be here because of an episode I listened to yours on your podcast, talking about beauty, body neutrality versus beauty culture and all of that. So I would like to dive into that in a short while. But first of all, can you share how has your business evolved since we last spoke with what you help women with? And then we'll naturally just have that flowy conversation, I'm sure, from there.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this. So, over the past, it was interesting. Before we hit record on this episode, Victoria was asking me how Europe was. We took 2 months off last year, sorry, and we took our kids, we went to Europe. And um, I don't know about you, but anytime I get that kind of time away from the busyness of life, and this was like really particularly special, something about the time difference. And we have girls that were preteens at the time, teens now, stripping away all the extracurricular activities, all of the social responsibilities, all of the play dates, all of the texts and phone calls. Like there was just this quiet and this clarity amidst a very busy, active trip that just offered me time to think about what I was doing in my work. And I had been slowly kind of baby stepping my way into evolving my work. And over the course of that 2 months, I realized like I'm really ready for the next evolution of this work. But it was scary, and I'll explain why. So when I was here last, so I'm a naturopathic doctor. I've been a naturopath for over 16 years. I do eating disorder work. So I work like in the really heavy end of the spectrum. I also work all across the spectrum, with people who are just in disordered eating or in really light problematic eating patterns. And so well, gosh, over 10 years ago now, I found intuitive eating and the health at every size movement. And it really changed my approach to the work that I do and it changed the trajectory of my life and my career and opened up all of these beautiful doors. And the thing that's really interesting is at that time, when I started talking about these things in newsletters, on podcasts, on Instagram, it was a very, very new idea. It wasn't long ago, right? 2013, 2012. That was a wild idea. This idea of maybe working with our bodies and accepting our bodies and eating in an intuitive way. There was, handfuls of people talking about it. I'm not, trying to say that I started the movement. It was definitely started for ages with, many women before me, but just it wasn't part of the zeitgeist at all. Like it wasn't we weren't seeing so many different sizes in modeling campaigns. That wasn't a thing still. It wasn't that long ago, right? So that was the work that I felt deeply dedicated to for almost 10 years was bringing that to people, bringing that to naturopathic medicine, bringing that to eating disorder recovery work. And then what I realized over the past probably 2 or 3 years was that the women that I work with were really grasping that concept. So they were doing really well with this idea of like intuitive eating. They were excited about it. Body acceptance is still a difficult thing, but they were there for it. It was a more well understood thing. There was also, hundreds of voices talking about it on podcasts and on social media. And I just realized that I was in this new era of wanting to circle back or like come full circle, I think, and like really reintegrate these lessons so that we could re-explore what it means to feel good in our bodies again.
Mm.
Because what I was finding is that many women were in the intuitive eating had opened the door to permission for them for the first time in
Yes.
forever or for the first time in decades, right? So they were in a lot of no's. They were in a lot of discipline, a lot of restriction, a lot of really all for the reason of controlling their bodies. Sometimes it was about health, but mostly it was about controlling their body. Intuitive eating opened the door to permission and yeses again, being allowed to eat the things that you want to eat, figuring out what your body wants, allowing yourself to be full, allowing yourself to be satiated. Like that was really beautiful. But then what I was seeing is that women in my practice anyway, and it could be because I'm a naturopath and I attract a certain kind of client or patient, but they were getting stuck where they were still like a little bit stuck in the yeses. So they had gotten off the really big roller coaster of binge eating and restriction, but they were on this, like, I call it like a mini kid roller coaster where it still felt like they just still didn't really feel in control of themselves, like in full agency. And
Mm,
because of their past with dieting, there was almost like a rebelliousness or a reactivity anytime they tried to think about doing something genuinely for their health. Like they had worked through a lot of the not perfectly, of course, we're humans and we live in a thin as best world still, but like they had worked through a lot of that old diet stuff and they were like, no, I just want to feel good though.
yeah.
And so I started doing that work one-on-one with people and in small groups. It felt hard to talk about it on social media because it felt like it would be deeply misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like you had to pick a camp. And I
Yeah.
get that. And I get that. I get that like a lot of the health and wellness world has like co-opted anti-diet language and misrepresented it. I totally understand that. But I just felt like there's more nuance here and we need to be able to talk about it. But it took me a while. It was a couple of years of working on this. And then that trip happened. And I thought, I just need to start. People are ready for this. Like we are ready to have a nuanced conversation about this, that we can invite more critical, intentional thinking back into the way that we feed ourselves and move.
Mm.
We have the capacity to do that and to not abandon our body or harm ourselves mentally and emotionally in order to do that. Like we can do this. So I came back and like spent basically a year kind of slowly evolving my brand. I was moving very slowly and just starting to talk about this. And it resonates, I think, for a lot of people, and it won't be right for everyone. And I get that. There's going to be people who aren't really interested in pursuing their health, who aren't really able to, maybe if they've been harmed in such a way by like wellness culture or diet culture. This will never be right for them. That's totally okay. And I think it's still okay to serve a certain part of the population that's really interested in this.
Yeah, wow. And I'm so glad that you transitioned into this. And I love your name of your podcast, by the way, 100% healthy-ish. Yes, because I remember when I started to crave like protein shakes and vegetables, and I would be like, oh my God, wait, does this mean I'm going back into restriction? I'd like overthink the food freedom guidelines in a way, because
Yeah.
it was almost like, well, I can't have a salad or an apple because then I'm in diet culture, but that's not true.
No, absolutely not. Like, and I have had people say, not much actually. Most people, I thought people would be much more critical, and maybe it will come. I'm not sure. But I've had people say, "Oh, this sounds diety," and I'm like, "Well, here's the thing: the definition of dieting within my work is that the ultimate metric of success in whatever you're trying to do is weight loss. So
Yeah,
that's like not part of what I'm doing here.
yeah, yeah,
This is genuinely about the fact that many women get to a certain point with intuitive eating. And again, they are still ever so slightly stuck in yeses,
hmm,
and they have low mood and low energy, and
yeah,
and they're bloated and they don't feel good. And that is not a way to go through. That's not the goal with intuitive eating. And I will say, like, this is part of intuitive eating. If we don't feel good, that is our body talking to us. I think that the only thing that I've noticed is, while it's in the intuitive eating book, and again, I understand you have to be so careful that people are ready for this information when you bring
yeah,
it to them.
yes,
So it's quite light in the book. And so this is the thing that I found, is I'm just trying to fill this hole of, people need more guidance, they need more tangible strategies and frameworks for re-engaging with being able to say no to things that aren't good for them or they know don't feel good to them without falling back into that rebelliousness, reactivity, or fear that they're dieting, right? They just need more support there. And I think if this makes sense, like one of the ways that I talk about this work is, early on in the intuitive eating process, we have to really turn the volume down on our brains, right? Like our brains are basically running the show, and our brains have all kinds of ideas about what's right for us. You and I were talking again before we hit record about like the right amount of chocolate to eat or the right amount of sugar to eat, and it's all coming from this very restrictive body management place, all those rules. So early on in the process, and it disconnects us from our body because our body's screaming at us for things and we're ignoring it because it's like, no, brain says no. So early on in the process, we really turn the volume down on our brain and connect with our bodies, right? In order to try to figure out what's the right amount of food for us, the right amount of chocolate, the right amount of, XYZ, whatever. But then at some point ultimate healing in my mind is being able to bring our brains back in. And this is really key for people who struggle to connect with their body. There's always going to be people who really struggle to hear what their body's saying. I think it's also important to note that there are many things that interfere with the information our body's trying to give us. The stress of day-to-day life, being busy, being overworked, like I'm now 44 and we're in that sandwich generation of having teens that need a lot of support and help, but also having parents that need a lot of help and support. Like our lives are freaking chaos some days. And some days I have to use my brain. Like my body would be great, just eat baked goods all day. And I could do that. I'm in full permission to do that. But I also know that if I want to be fully present for the one-on-ones from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. that I have booked, I can't eat that way.
Yes.
So I could if I wanted to, but my brain, I'm also an adult and I'm able to be like, no, that's not good for me though. I want to be alert. I want to be energetic. I want to be focused. So I'm going to eat like this morning, and that's like bringing my brain back in, right?
I think the key there, what you're saying and what you're sharing is, and in order for people to be ready to do this work, is I see it as when someone has detached their worthiness to what they eat or don't eat or their body size, it then creates a space to choose nourishment and pleasure with eating, like you've just shared. Would you agree?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Like it's not if I ate the muffin because I was really stressed out and I didn't have time or whatever, it's not a moral failing and I'm not feeling bad about it and it's not going to spiral into this big drama.
Yeah.
So and that was always the goal with intuitive eating. Again, I want to be clear. I'm not pretending like that's not, that's always the goal with intuitive eating, to be able to make choices. Like I said, I think it's just really tricky. Like I was on another podcast and I brought back in this idea of, I have talked for years about restriction being bad. And I'm like, but again, at 44, after turning 40, my body has changed and I need to care for it differently. And there are some things that I flexibly limit that you could say I restrict, but I don't think of it in a bad way. I just flexibly limit in order to have the energy to get through my day, to manage my thyroid, to manage and this is also something that I bring in because, as a naturopath, I also work with people who are coming to me with like diabetes or high cholesterol or, gastritis or, different health issues where we do have to sometimes intentionally, thoughtfully, flexibly limit or restrict certain foods in order to create the freedom to live their lives, right? And I'll talk about it like, sometimes I need to limit how much TV I'm watching. Sometimes I have to limit how much alcohol I'm drinking or coffee. Sometimes I have to limit in order to like open something bigger up in my life that I need, And again, when you detach from the morality and the value and the worth associated with like eating a certain way, you open up to being able to consider that for yourself again.
Yes, I see it also as taking loving, gentle, non-judgment ownership of your choices. For example, the TV. Okay, if I wake up tomorrow and I'm tired because I've chosen to continue watching the next series and the next series and the next series, and I wake up the next day and I'm like, oh, I'm tired, I shouldn't have done this and it's my fault. That's like actually not taking ownership of your choices at that time. And then you feel bad and you go into a spiral. Same with food. Sometimes someone might experience this with food. Whereas if you wake up and say, you know what, I'm tired because I chose to enjoy those extra episodes of whatever it was last night. I'm taking full ownership of that without judgment. So, how
Yeah.
can I best take care of myself today? Perhaps we'll have an early night tonight
Yeah.
without making it that you're bad or
Yeah.
wrong. And I'm going to offer us both a quote that you know has come from Isabel Fox and Duke, who is no longer in the food freedom space, which is very sad.
Yeah.
And she says dieting is not an action, it's a state of mind, meaning you can choose to perhaps, I'm not going to use the word limit, but perhaps to say no to the cake this afternoon because
Yeah.
you've got back-to-back client calls this afternoon. And that might look like a diet behavior, but if you're not restricting up here mentally and emotionally, it's not restriction, therefore it's not dieting.
That's exactly it. Like cake is a part of my, like, ice cream makes me feel terrible. I love it. I eat it. I just don't eat it all the time because
Yeah.
it makes me actually feel terrible. Like movie theater popcorn is part of my life. It'll always be part of my life. I don't feel great after I eat it, but I love eating it. And as an adult, there are moments when I'm just willing to accept the consequences and I'm in full enjoyment of it. And again, that was always the goal. And even Isabel would talk about that. She would talk about the fact that, I mean, I think she's celiac. Like she'd just be like,
Yeah.
I don't eat gluten, but like I occasionally, if a croissant looks really good, I just eat it. And then, I suffer the consequences and it's worth it. I have just found that many women need a lot more guidance when it
Yeah.
comes to like figuring out how to use their no thoughtfully. Flexibility is the big thing. So being able to move back and forth, like being able to say no to the cake without it triggering some kind of weird spiral, or being able to say yes to the cake. There's this flexibility that I think requires some practice. Because,
Yes.
like I said, many are still on the little kid roller coaster where they're like a little bit in restriction or a little bit in like binge isn't the right word, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's all good. I don't care. Like there's almost an unconsciousness. And, I've talked about it in the past. I think sometimes the unconscious phase is really important. Like if there's been so much drama and focus around food and health and like anxiety, and sometimes we just need a phase where we're just like, whatever,
Yeah,
you
I'm
know?
going to have it just because I can. But you're right. There does come a point where I'm thinking of one client in particular. I'm going to send her this direct episode. So you know who you are, my love. I'm going to ask a question for her to you so I can see how you answer and perhaps support her. So said client is in food freedom. I do know there's still a little bit of emotional judgment when she's eating like processed foods a lot. So there is still some mental restriction there, but she's eating the foods just because she can. Why not? It's there because of all the restriction in the past, but she feels awful in her body. She feels bloated. She feels like, ugh, she's got no energy, all of that. So, how would you support her going from that place of where I've just shared that she is to using her mind without obviously going back into diet culture and restriction?
So one of the things that I think is important here is that it will be really hard for most people to fully get rid of that moralizing of certain foods. I think just being aware of it, naming it for what it is, and just not letting it really run the show is
Yeah.
key. I think also this is the lame part of the answer, but it's so dependent on the individual I'm working with. And it's one of the reasons I've gone back to some one-on-one work. Like I was doing a lot of group work and I was trying to bring this in. I ran a program last year and it was great, but it is highly nuanced work and it's not an exact science. There's a bit of a vibe, right? There's an art to knowing when someone um, is ready to move into this. And it's
Yes.
always a little bit of an experiment. And I'm like, you know what, if it's not right, we'll know really quickly because it will start to trigger things that don't feel good to you.
Yeah.
Like a little bit more of that binge eating that might have been
Yes.
happening in the past, right? But what I would do is just ask her what flexible parameters might look like. So, you know, fried processed foods genuinely are not really necessarily supposed to be part of an everyday day-to-day diet. Like, again, if you're normalizing your relationship with these foods, that's part of the process.
Yes.
That's the exercise. But like, I would ask her, like, what would, if she's eating it 6 or 7 days a week, what would it look like to only have it 5 days a week? What would it look like to only have it 4 days a week? And just really baby step your way through it. And, what I'm really hoping is that the differences in how she feels in her body will fuel very slow forward momentum. But it's not the kind of thing where we can typically go from eating it maybe every day to just, we'll have it just once a week. Like, that doesn't tend to work. We have to really baby step our way there and make lots of space so that there's still safety in the body, still feels like I can have what I want if I really, really want it. I would just go really slowly, but start by asking her. Even asking that question can bring up a lot of interesting information, because if they're like, I would never eat it, okay, maybe you're not quite ready
Yes.
for this work, or if they're like, I would only eat it once a month, it's like, well, is that really realistic? Is that really who you genuinely are? Like, that's an interesting piece of this work, right? Like, helping people, like, part of the work is I talk about this like spectrum from kind of like dieting to full blown, I don't know what the word is, like hedonism or all in permission, you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
just
Like,
just because I can, kind of
yeah, just because I
thing.
can. Like, the reality is all of us kind of naturally, normally sit at different places and feel good in different places. And
Yeah.
so there are some people who can really genuinely not eat fried processed foods except once a month because they naturally sit over here. The problem is everybody thinks they should be able to sit over there. And that's not really
Yes.
true,
Mhm.
right? Like, there are certain people that I've worked with where I've just had to we've done a lot of work to be like, here's the sitch. You freaking love going through a drive through and getting a burger and fries once or twice a week. That is who you are. And
Yeah.
if we try to push you too far away from that, it just, there's consequences, and we just, there's like this bounce back where you end up eating triple that much. We
Yes.
have to allow this much. Like, so you're trying to sort of like play with people to find the spot where they can sit, and that can evolve a little bit for sure as people heal. But where's the place where they can sit, where they're affecting their physical body the least without triggering mental emotional reaction?
Yeah. So it's more like
It's a process.
it's a process. And I would say you don't have to have willpower. You just have to make a conscious choice in response to how you want to feel in your body. So it's not willpower, is it? There's no forcing, there's no restriction, there's no willpowering your way to say only have the burger twice a week. It's a conscious, like, okay, actually, Jillian suggested this. I'm going to see how it feels to just have it maybe once a week and see how that feels. If it feels, so talking back to said client, if she was to feel panicky or
Right.
anxious about the fact that we're suggesting perhaps see how it feels 5 times a week, not 7 times a week, then that for me, and I don't know what you feel about this, just shows that there's more work to do around feeling safety,
Yes.
eating just because you can, until you can then make a choice without being triggered back into.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And um, yeah, I work with this like hierarchy of food needs, and it'd be good if I could send it to you. It's too bad because we can't see a visual here, but it sort of parallels Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which
Yes.
he stole from the Blackfoot people, so it wasn't originally his. But essentially, his hierarchy of needs is, we have to meet fundamental needs like safety and shelter before we can spiral up into things like relationships and community building and self-actualization, like that's at the peak, right? And so when it comes to food, I work with that pyramid, and it's like using food functionally to affect how we feel physically is at the very top of that pyramid, at the peak.
Mm.
But underneath of that are these layers of like making sure you get enough food, first and foremost. Second, that you're eating food that's really yummy to you, like it satiates you, it feels
Mm.
deeply satiating. Then variety, then we get, and then we get up into like functional food. But the thing is that just like with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you don't have to push or force yourself to the top of the pyramid. If you are genuinely needing these layers below, you naturally spiral up.
Yes, yes,
And
yes,
not everyone spirals up to the same place. Like, again, with it, it's like a different way of talking about that spectrum. Like, not everyone, even if they're really well fed and eating food that's delicious and getting lots of variety, is going to ever care about,
and
the
that's
amount of sugar
okay.
they're eating or the gluten in their diet, and that's fine. That's like, okay, like that's part of this process. Like I said, is figuring out where each individual, like, how much time and energy and effort do you actually care about putting into this?
Yeah.
What
I would
feels good to
say,
you? Where are your values around food? What, like,
yeah.
yeah.
I love how you said naturally, because I'm at the stage, I'm at the top of the pyramid now, and I do a lot of weight training. And so to support that, I make sure I don't count it or anything, but I make sure, okay, at every meal and snack, am I eating protein? So, for example, if I want some chocolate, I'll add in a protein shake, not to
Yeah,
balance that blood sugar, actually, because my body's fine with dealing with that itself, but just to make sure I personally am getting enough protein in to support my muscle mass and my training. But I couldn't have done that when I first started intuitive eating, because it would have been too diety, and I would have been like, fuck the protein, fuck the vegetables, and then I'll just binge.
that's it. That's exactly it. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, we're talking about a very specific place in this work.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, because it is a specific place and because it is not for everyone, I thought that I couldn't do the work, but it's for some people. And it's like,
Yeah.
it, there is this, I'm in the same place where I make really conscious choices every day. Um, I allow myself all the foods. There's nothing that's not allowed.
Yes, that
I
is
eat
that is
all the
absolute
things.
key.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I still make conscious choices every day. Um, just because I wasn't feeling good in my body. My digestion didn't feel good. My energy didn't feel good. My
Mm.
focus didn't feel good. And I just got to the point where I was just ready. I was like ready to do the work. And like you said, it doesn't feel like willpower. I do make choices sometimes. Sometimes I'll have like an urge to eat something in the day and I'll say no. But I don't feel like I'm willpowering my way through it. I just feel like I'm making a choice, just the same way I might have the urge to sit down and watch The Real Housewives of
Mm.
Beverly Hills, but I'm like, no, I don't have time for that.
Yes.
Gotta move on. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's segue now into, because I feel like the title of this episode is going to be something like the next step or the next stage after intuitive eating, because I
Yeah.
do want to make it clear. I know I have a lot of listeners who are in restrictive eating disorders. This is
Mhm.
the eating disorder might latch onto this and be like, oh, yay, the profession. No, I can see you, not you, the eating disorder. This is not for you unless you have been intuitive eating for at least 6 months and have a good, relationship with your body. So just to
Yeah,
make it clear.
agree. Yeah, the ED is going to want to latch on very
Yes.
quickly. And it's like, no, you don't get to skip the steps,
Yes.
right? You don't get to, that's not the way it works. Yeah.
It's not the
Yeah.
way it works.
Yeah.
So I would like to segue into, because obviously intuitive eating and the work that we do is there's a lot of body acceptance. Of course, it
Yeah.
has to come hand in hand, because otherwise
Yeah.
you don't get to the root problem of said dieting in the first place. And so talking about body acceptance, let's say that this episode is based around people who have intuitive eating kind of understood, body acceptance, they're kind of there. The next stage for that, which is what I would love to go into now, is how does beauty culture come into this? Because I'm wearing makeup today and I tend to most days. And then someone asked me one time, are you not playing into beauty culture then? And I'm like, probably. So, how does that work in terms of this space of radical acceptance and wanting to like the way you look without, again, falling back into worthiness equals liking the way my body looks?
Well, that is like been a question since the beginning of all of this work, right? Like it's always like just start to enjoy the way you look outside of current beauty ideals and body ideals. How do you even do that when beauty and body ideals color everything that we see, and for me it's never been about trying to fully escape beauty and body ideals. It's been about noticing where they're very limited and trying to increase my flexibility in where I see and find beauty, right? So
Yeah.
instead of being like thin is best, doesn't matter, it's nothing, it's like, no, thin, I can see why I have this attraction or this um interest in thin bodies because it's been so deeply repeated, and the story has been told a million times to me about what it means to be in this body. But I'm also going to start to actually seek out beauty in different forms and different kinds of bodies and different stories. So I think the first thing is just like broadening our definition of beauty, so we actually have some choices. Like if you're only seeing one thing, but still, the thing that I talked about in the podcast that you were mentioning is this idea that my belief, there's some people who really like the idea of body neutrality, or like just forgetting about their body. They want to just neutralize it. They think that we should just like, it's like not a thing, just neutralize it, never think about it. And for them, that's healing.
Yes.
And that's great. Again, fabulous. I'm happy for everybody to figure out where they what's best for them. But in working with many people, what I have found is that for a lot of the women I work with, that's actually just an iteration of healing. And then just like with this healthy-ish, there is this point where they want to return a little bit to enjoying their body and the way that it looks on some level.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think like, so what I talked about in that podcast is the fact that one of my belief systems is that beauty will always be important to certain humans on some level. Like it's why we engage with art and music, and we love beautiful spaces and homes and architecture, and like that's all beauty, like again, the problem with the way that it's been put on humans is how restrictive it's been.
Yeah.
But if we take away the restrictiveness of what defines beauty, if we, again, just like going back to the food stuff, if we just start to slowly detach worth and value,
yes,
then there's this room for playfulness again and choice. Do I think that our current beauty ideals still play into it? Of course I do. Like we're still interested in, like, we're swayed, or not interested, but we are swayed by fashion trends. We're swayed by, but it's like developing that space so that you can have the fortitude to stay on your own path versus being too deeply invested in what other people are doing, to the point where you harm yourself. Like, to me, that's the difference. Naomi Wolf wrote about it in The Beauty Myth. She talks about like this, is there a woman-centered definition of beauty? And that's exactly what she talks about. She talks about when how we look isn't the sum total of our worth and value, it stops being a war or a mission to be something in the world. And it starts just being a playful part of expressing who we are.
Yes, I love that.
Our style, how we do our, if you wear a beauty uniform or a clothing uniform, I have a friend who wears has a million pairs of the same white t-shirt and jeans. And that's like who she is, like, and then I have other friends that are like colorful and always have to have a rotating cast of clothing in their closet, and then everything in between. It becomes this fun way to express our personality and to sink deeper into who we are and to play. And beauty can be, what Naomi Wolf writes in that book is like, beauty could be red lipstick and high heels, or it can be overalls and combat boots. Like, it could be whatever is beautiful to you.
Yeah. And I also feel that when you are in that space where you're able to play with makeup and clothes, because you've detached your worth and value from looking a certain way, it then gets exciting, like you said. And it also, oh my God, lost train of thought. That was epic, Victoria. Now you've lost it. Don't know where I was getting with that, but there's something else I wanted to say anyway. I think it comes down to, let's say, this was perhaps where I was going. When that's detached from your worth and value, you're then able to go to the shop without any makeup on, with your hair in a bun, and not care. And at the same time, like today, I have a beautiful red dress on because I love red. I've done my makeup more today because I've got quite a lot of calls today. Oh yeah, here it was. You can step into the energy of how you feel when you dress yourself a certain way. So I would have a different energy within myself now if I was sat here in pajamas with no makeup on and my hair like on top of my head. I'd be the same person, but I would show up differently in a different energy. So I think when we are able to play with makeup and hair and clothes, we can use it to create the energy we want to bring into the world. So sometimes if you don't want to be seen, or you don't want to have that queen strong energy, I will choose something like, baggy jeans and a plain t-shirt, just because, especially if I'm on my period and I'm bleeding, I want to be in that kind of safe kind of feeling of like, please, can people just like be at my space? So I think you're right, bringing that playfulness back into it without attaching it to our worth and who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like you said, definitely I think having to be in full makeup and full, dress to do anything and everything, like even on vacation while you're at the beach, like that is for sure. Yeah. That's a sign of maybe like deep insecurity, but it's really also been interesting in the work that I've done that sometimes having zero interest in real rejection or rebellion and caring about those things at all can also be a sign of deep insecurity or fear or hiding. And so it's, if we think about that spectrum, it's like, how can we be in the middle? Like, I love to get dressed up and go out. I'm also very comfortable to be, I was with my family in PEI, which is an island off the coast of Canada. I don't know where people are when they're listening to this, but we spend weeks just going to the beach every day and like, no makeup, really, no hair. My hair's been pulled back for weeks because I just got out of the lake. Like it's just like with food, finding this like ebb and flow and flexibility to see ourselves as worthy and okay in many different states, and then being able to access the ones that we want in a given moment, like to conjure that energy. I think it's really fun.
I do too. And I think going into like body acceptance, and I mean, I had to start with neutrality. I had to start with just like, okay, I have a body, because I'd spent my whole entire life obsessing over my body. It was actually a breath of fresh air and extremely difficult to get to that place of complete body neutrality. And then I naturally started to be like, well, I'm kind of ready to look in the mirror and actually like some parts of what I see, without that being back into diet culture, but actually being able to appreciate the physical appearance of certain parts of my body without rejecting the parts of myself that I didn't or don't particularly like the look of, and being okay with that. And so wearing clothes that accentuate the parts that I think look best, not because I'm rejecting the parts I don't think look best, but just because it's fun and it feels high vibe energy for me to be that in the world. And especially as a woman, to be connected to our sexuality and our sexual essence and our sexual vibe is important to me. And that just helps me show up in, I mean, you can see my pronouns, which is probably quite wrong of me. On Zoom, I have queen in brackets.
That's cute.
Because I speak to my clients as queens, I call myself a queen, because that's an energy, a vibe, and it just helps me show up in the world how I want to. So how would you help someone who perhaps is in acceptance and they're a bit wary about showing up and playing with clothes and makeup, because again, they're worried about it triggering looking at the way their body physically looks again, if they're worried that it might trigger desire for weight loss and all of that? How would you perhaps start with the baby steps to navigate someone through that into where perhaps we both are now?
So it's not so different from the food work. It's this experimentation. It's baby stepping. I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast. I might have, but I'll repeat it here. Like, I've talked about this for years, but Caitlin Moran, a famous British feminist who's written so many great books. In one of her latest books, she talked about this idea of, it just really deeply resonated with me because I have girls that are teens, and she was talking about one of her daughters developed a pretty severe eating disorder that their family had to work their way through. But she talked about like trying to teach her girls about that saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And we all know that saying, and it's kind of nice, like, yeah, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But what I most see is that women believe that they're the object of beauty, and they're constantly trying to like manipulate themselves and mold themselves and turn themselves into a pretzel to like
Yeah.
be this thing that's highly subjective, that's always
Yeah.
up for criticism by whomever happens to be looking on them, you know?
Yeah.
And so what Caitlin wrote about in her book is like teaching her daughters, like, your job in life is not to be the beauty, it's to be the beholder. Like, be a fucking
Mm.
beholder, you
Yeah.
know? Like, you get to decide what's beautiful. And she's like, you know, in her teenager's room, and she's like, it's so clear because they've got posters on the wall and they've got photos, and it's like, you get a real vibe when you walk into a teen's room of how they see the world and what's beautiful to them, what's
Yeah.
cool to them. And so I kind of start that exercise with people. We'll start it with Pinterest boards or collages, like, not just about clothes, but like, what is beautiful to you? Like,
Mm.
what do you want more of in your life? What, and then slowly, you know, working toward finding their style. Sometimes I refer them even to work with a stylist to help them figure that out. But thinking about it in that greater picture, I think, is really interesting at first, and like seeing what their Pinterest board looks like and what are the outfits. And you know, one of the things that's been really fun for me is just to start wearing the outfits that I really like, regardless if my body's quote unquote correct for it or not.
Yes.
Like, I like some of the fashion trends, I just wear them now, you know, and I'll occasionally look in the mirror and be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I don't, you know, like, it doesn't match up with like what I had in my mind. And that's okay. Cause I'm just like learning to see trends on different bodies. And
Yeah.
that's another thing. It's not right for everyone. Not everyone can do it, depending on where they're at in the healing process. But I really like, when I'm struggling in my body or worried, to try to hold that energy for other women. Like, if I wear this outfit and then I go to dinner tonight with a group of friends, like, I'm showing the group of friends, I'm showing every woman that sees me going into that restaurant or at that restaurant another version of what this trend looks like on a different body.
Yeah.
We
Wow.
need that. Like, what we desire is deeply subjective and
Yes.
deeply affected by what we see over and over and over again, you know? And I can be that example sometimes. Like, I don't see my body everywhere, you know? So, and you know, I'm in a medium-sized body. It's not the most radical thing in the world, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's a thing. It's a thing. And it helps me conjure up the energy to sort of put that outfit on and just go out and enjoy it. Right.
I love that. If you can't do it for me, do it for the we.
Yeah. Because
That's
that's
what helped.
easier for many women.
It was easier for me when I was going through eating disorder recovery. I got to a, and I, when especially when I started to want to help people in this realm as well, it was so much easier for me to dress, for example, wear the shorts, because my legs used to be a problem area for me because I have cellulite. You know, wow. I mean, I'm a woman and I have cellulite
Yeah.
in my legs. God
You're a
forbid.
human. Who knew?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I would wear, like, you know, there was that hashtag at one point, wear the damn shorts. And I couldn't do it for me because I didn't like what I saw, but I could definitely do it for the other women out there who needed permission, in a way. Not that we need permission, but it's helpful to have, quote, permission from someone like myself or
Yeah.
like you or anyone wearing something that they might resonate, or they might think, oh, her body's similar to mine and she can wear that and she's confident in it, and like she's not busting into flames because she's wore something that beauty standards might perhaps disagree with, and it gives them permission to do the same. So that was really big for me too. So women with children, I sometimes suggest, you know, especially if they have daughters, if you can't do it for you yet, because this is all about you, but if you can't do it for you yet, that's fine. Think of your daughter, like, can you do it for her? What would you want her to see? How would you want her to show up for herself? So that can be really helpful, can't it, to do it for somebody else, not you, long
Yeah.
term.
And then one other thing I would add is like, I love that. And I think one of the iterations for me personally was also wearing things that, like, in that vein of like being the beholder and what's beautiful. I realized that like fabrics really mattered to me. Feeling comfortable in clothing really mattered to me. And
Yeah.
so I actually started with how I felt in clothes. And so for me, I very quickly started wearing, you know, tighter tank tops and short shorts in the summer because they're actually more comfortable on my body than wearing like, you know, for a while I was wearing like Bermuda shorts down to my knee and it covered more of my thighs. But I'm like, this is not comfortable for me, actually. A
Yeah.
stretchy, shorter shirt. And I just chose how I felt in my clothes above looks. That was definitely like my first iteration. And then it slowly evolved into like, and now I kind of like the way that those look. And, developing, like sort of finding my style. So for people who are visually struggling to find their style, they could start by texturally finding their
Mm.
style first.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you'll be led by your intuition to fabrics, colors, things like that. And
Yeah.
what really helped me was, and I still do this, to look at women my size or bigger on Instagram who are those fashion people who were like, triangle different. So I found
Yeah.
quite a few people who have similar shapes to me, similar height to me because I'm short, similar build, who wear different clothes. And I'm like, oh, I love the way that accentuates that curve, or actually I don't like that. And again, the biggest key here, I think, is to have separated your worthiness and value from the way you look. And I think that's really important. And then you're able to just play and have fun and all of that. So, is there anything that I've not asked you, Jillian, that you would like to share around our conversation?
No, it's been such a good conversation. I've really loved it. I like getting to talk about this because it is a
Mm-hmm.
nuanced conversation. And so I just want to say like thanks for having it because it's
Of course.
hard. Um, but yeah, I think it's important. I think it's an important part of the work. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's okay to choose, quote, healthy, nourishing foods. It's okay to say no to the cake if it's not restriction. It's okay to actually look in the mirror and like the way your body looks. All of
Mhm.
that is okay. And again, just to reiterate, anyone that's in an eating disorder, this is not for you. But if you have any questions and want to reach out to me and Jillian, then we'll be more than happy to help. But Jillian, can you share how you are currently working with clients so people can reach out if they
Mhm.
want to work with you further?
Yeah, so I'm actually I don't know when this will go live, if it will go
Um,
live soon.
Very soon. I'm saying like 3 to 4 weeks max, it's going to be out.
Yeah, so you can find me at Dr. Jillian Murphy ND on Instagram. And I'm actually going to be hosting this fall a 3-week healthy-ish reset, which is like, again, for people who are ready to start to dip their toe into like, what does it mean to put a little bit more intention and focus on my physical body and how it feels. But we're going to be going through all of these lessons from like, what does it look like to say no to something or to limit it? And what are the caveats? What would be the things that we're looking for that might indicate that this is coming from the wrong place or it's
Mhm.
triggering something in you? We're going to talk about what does it look like to be strategic about learning how to be flexible with our choices. So not have to be a brick wall or a jellyfish when it
Yeah.
comes to decision making around food, but what does it look like to be that like, spinal column that has structure and flexibility? We're going to talk about urges and desires and what does it look like to make some decisions for longer term desires versus always short term desires. Like very nuanced, but I think really beautiful conversations. We're going to talk about add-in strategies and movement and how that fits into all of it. So that's going to be really fun, I think. And like just an experiment and an exploration for people who want to, and it could be done at any time. It could be done. I joke, like it could be done. We all go through periods of like really big stressful moments at work where like we totally ignore our bodies for like a month because we're so stressed out, or with family, or um you've been sick. I totally have had women who are like, I've had a cold for 3 months and haven't been able to take care of myself. And I need to get, I want to feel
Yeah.
better quickly. Like, how can I do that? So we're exploring that. And then beyond that, I also create these beautiful, healthy ish blueprints for people where we look at this whole constellation of things that are affecting their overall well being. And sort of coaching sessions can be added to that where we help them work through like, what does it look like to sink into and to live this healthy-ish life that you're after. So there's sort of like really short term, and then there's this like bigger, longer term process that people can go through, and they can find all of that on my website, which is still foodfreedombodylove.com.
Okay, I'll obviously link everything below. And I want to say
Thank
that
you.
I think it might have been over a year ago now. I actually had a blueprint call with Jillian. It's still to this day one of the best things I've ever done for my own journey. So don't underestimate what you can learn in what was it, an hour, 90 minutes or
Yeah.
something?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah.
It's amazing. And I think it's so crucial, Jillian, that you're bringing this into the world because you have a deep understanding of eating disorder. And that is crucial, if you ask me. And I'm not slating anyone here, but those that haven't experienced or don't have knowledge around eating disorders, that are trying to bring, you know, healthy eating and all of that into this world, it can be very dangerous very quickly if they don't understand what to look out for and the red flags. And of course you do, because you've
Or
been
if they're, and if they're often in it themselves still a little
yes.
bit, which is very common, we know. Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
Agree. Yeah. And that's still part of my day to day. Like I still, I do several hours, like 3 like half days a week in like major eating disorder work. So it's still always top of mind. You're right. And it's important. Yeah.
Thank you, Jillian. You've been incredible as always. I really appreciate you coming on, and listeners, I will see you next week. Lots of love.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.